The park was nearly empty that cold autumn morning. Leaves crunched underfoot as David adjusted his scarf and sat on the old wooden bench overlooking the lake. He used to come here every Sunday, back when life was easier before the layoffs, before the bills, before his wife packed her bags and left. Now, this bench was his only refuge from the noise of the world. He was halfway through a stale sandwich when he noticed her, a frail old woman, sitting on the far end of the same bench. She was small, wrapped in a faded green shawl, her hands resting on a cane that looked older than she did. She didn't speak, didn't move much, just watched the lake as if she could see something far beyond its surface. For several minutes they sat in silence. Then, without looking at him, she said softly, "You've lost something, haven't you?" David turned. "Excuse me?" Her eyes were gray and sharp, like polished stones. "Something precious. Something you can't get back." He frowned. "That's a strange thing to say." "Not really," she replied. "Everyone who sits on this bench has lost something." T gave a half laugh. "That's comforting." She smiled faintly. "It isn't meant to be comforting. It's meant to remind you that loss is only half the story." David didn't understand, but something about her tone made him stay quiet. The wind rustled the trees behind them, carrying the scent of rain. When he looked again, she was gone. Only the faint imprint of where she sat remained on the bench. That night, David couldn't sleep. The woman's words echoed in his head. Loss is only half the story. He opened his laptop, hoping to distract himself, but instead found an old photo folder, pictures of his wife, Emily, smiling under this very tree years ago. He hadn't realized how much that spot meant to him until now. The next morning, he went back to the park. The bench was empty again, but this time, a small brass plaque caught his attention. It hadn't been there before. It read, "The Bench of Hope, in memory of those who never gave up." He stared at it, feeling a strange pull in his chest. He traced the engraved letters with his fingers. The plaque looked newly polished, though the bench was decades old. "Strange, isn't it?" said a voice behind him. David turned to see a park caretaker, a man in his 60s with mud-stained gloves. "That plaque," the caretaker said, "wasn't there yesterday? I've been tending this park for 20 years. Never seen it before." "Do you know who put it there?" David asked. The man shook his head. "No idea. But people leave strange things here sometimes. Flowers, letters, even keys. Some say this bench listens." David chuckled. "Listens." "Yeah," the caretaker said, leaning on his rake. "They say if you speak your pain here, someone or something listens back." Over the next few days, David found himself returning to the bench. It became a quiet routine. Sit, think, speak. At first, he whispered small things about losing his job, about missing his wife. Nothing happened. But on the 5th day, when he finally broke down crying, something did. As his tears hit the cold wooden slats, he heard a whisper. Faint, almost drowned by the wind. "Not yet. Not done yet." He froze, looked around. No one was there. The whisper had come from behind him, more beneath him. He couldn't tell. He told himself it was the wind and walked home faster than usual. That night, he dreamed of the old woman. She stood beside the bench, holding a small candle. Behind her, a faint outline of people, shadowy, blurred, sat on the ground, watching him. "Do you see them now?" she asked. "Who are they?" He whispered. "The ones who gave up," she said. "They come to listen. They remember what it's like to hope." He woke up drenched in sweat. 3 days later, David returned again, determined to make sense of what was happening. This time, there was a folded piece of paper resting on the bench. No one else was in sight. He opened it carefully. Hope is not something you find. It's something you return to. There was no signature, just a faint water stain shaped like a teardrop. He kept the note, though he didn't know why. That evening, curiosity got the better of him. He asked a local librarian if she'd ever heard of the Bench of Hope. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "There's an old story," she said. "Years ago decades, maybe there was a woman who sat on that bench every day, waiting for her son to return from war. He never did, but she never stopped coming. People said her hope kept her alive. And when she died, the bench became different. How?" David asked. The librarian gave a nervous smile. "Some say her spirit listens to those who've lost their way, helps them find a reason to live again." David didn't believe in spirits, but he couldn't deny what he'd experienced. The whisper, the plaque, the dreams. They all pointed to something. That night, he wrote a letter. It wasn't meant for anyone in particular, just words he needed to release. "Dear whoever you are, I don't know if you're real, but if you're listening, thank you for reminding me that I still matter, that I can start again." He folded the letter and placed it under the bench the next morning. When he came back the following day, the letter was gone. In its place was another note handwritten in elegant cursive. "You already have. Tomorrow will bring you someone who needs hope more than you do." David's pulse quickened. Someone was playing with him, or something wasn't right. The next day, while sitting on the bench, he noticed a young boy standing by the lake. Maybe 12 years old, thin, wearing a school uniform that didn't fit right. The boy looked like he'd been crying. David hesitated but called out gently, "Hey, you okay?" The boy wiped his face and nodded, though he didn't move. "What's your name?" David asked. "Leo," the boy said quietly. "Want to sit down for a bit?" Leo came over slowly and sat beside him. For a long time, neither spoke. Then the boy whispered, "My mom's sick. They say she won't get better." David felt a sting in his chest. "I'm sorry," Leo shrugged, eyes on the lake. "I come here because I think this place listens." David turned sharply. "Who told you that?" Leo looked surprised. "My grandma. She said the lady on the bench listens if you really mean what you say." David stared at him. "Your grandma, what's her name?" "Evelyn," the boy said. David's breath caught. The old woman's name, the one from his dream. When David looked back toward the lake, he saw something impossible. In the reflection of the water behind him and the boy, sat a third figure on the bench, a faint silhouette of an elderly woman in a green shawl, smiling. He blinked hand. She was gone. Leo turned to him, wide-eyed. "Did you see her too?" David couldn't answer. His hands trembled. "Yeah," he finally said. "I did." The boy smiled weakly. "Then it's real." That night, thunder rolled through the city. David sat by his window, staring at the storm. He thought about Evelyn, about Leo, about the whispers in the wind. Somehow, he felt lighter, as if something had been lifted off his chest. He returned to the park one last time before dawn. The bench was there, glistening with rain. On the seat rested a small brass key tied to a ribbon with a tag that read, "For the next one who forgets what hope feels like." He smiled through tears, pocketed the key, and whispered into the cold morning air, "Thank you," from somewhere beyond the rustling leaves. A woman's soft voice replied, "You're welcome, David." And for the first time in a long time, he believed it the next morning. David woke up with the small brass key clutched in his hand. He didn't remember falling asleep with it, but there it was, warm as if it had been held for hours. He turned it over, studying every curve and scratch. It wasn't an ordinary key. Its surface shimmered faintly when caught by sunlight, and engraved on the side was a single word, "Return." He tried it on every lock in his apartment, but it fit none. That day he couldn't concentrate on anything. Work applications sat half-written, meals went cold. His thoughts circled the same questions. What did the key open, and why him? By sunset, he was back at the park. The lake glowed orange in the fading light, and the bench stood empty, as if waiting for him. He sat, took a deep breath, and whispered, "What do you want me to do?" The air around him grew still. Then, for the briefest second, he felt warmth on his shoulder, like a hand resting gently, reassuringly. A woman's voice, soft and distant, spoke near his ear. "Find the house." David froze. "What house?" No answer. The air grew normal again, birds chirped, leaves rustled, and the feeling vanished. He stood up quickly and noticed something new. Carved faintly into the wooden plank beneath the seat were coordinates numbers so small they could have been mistaken for scratches. He pulled out his phone and typed them in. The location appeared. It was a neighborhood just outside town, an old district near the forest edge, mostly abandoned. He hesitated, but his curiosity burned stronger than fear. The next morning he went. The area was quiet, fog rolling low between leafless trees. Most of the houses were boarded up, windows cracked, mailboxes rusted shut. But one house stood out, a small white cottage with peeling paint and a garden overrun with ivy. On its front door was an ancient brass lock. David's hand shook as he tried the key. It turned smoothly. The door creaked open. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and faint traces of lavender. The furniture was covered in sheets, yet everything seemed untouched, as if someone had left just yesterday. In the living room, an old photo sat on the mantelpiece. It showed a young woman in a green shawl holding a little boy, maybe 6 years old, smiling by the same lake where the bench stood. The handwriting below read, "Evelyn and Thomas, 1943. David's throat tightened. Thomas, her son, the one who never came back from the war. He stepped further in and noticed letters stacked neatly on the table, tied with a red ribbon. They were all addressed to my dearest Thomas. Trembling, he opened the first one. "My dear boy, they say the war will end soon. I sit by the bench every day, waiting for you. Some say I'm foolish, but I can still feel you. When I close my eyes, I hear your laughter in the wind." The letters continued, pages and pages of hope and longing, written over decades. Until the final one. "My beloved son, my time grows short. If my hope must end, let it become a seed for someone else. Let this bench remember for me, listen for me, comfort for me. And if one day a lost soul finds it, tell them they are not alone." David's eyes blurred. He folded the letter carefully and set it down. As he did, he noticed something odd on the floorboards, thin lines forming a faint circular mark. He brushed away the dust. It wasn't just a mark, it was a symbol, intricate, old, the same shape he'd seen faintly in his dream behind the woman's candlelight. He whispered, "Evelyn, what did you do?" The lights flickered. The air turned cold. And then, behind him, the door slammed shut. David spun around. Standing by the window was Evelyn. She looked exactly as before, frail.com, her shawl glowing faintly in the dim light. But her eyes were different, now sad, tired, infinite. "You came," she said softly. David swallowed. "What is this place?" "Home," she answered. "The beginning and the end. Why me?" he asked. "Because you listened," she whispered. "Most people only speak. You listened. What do you want from me?" Her gaze drifted toward the letters. "To finish what I started." She stepped closer, the floorboards creaking beneath her invisible weight. "There are others like you, David. People who've forgotten how to hope. I can't reach them anymore. But you can me." He said in disbelief. "I'm nobody." "You were?" she said. Until you sat on that bench. Suddenly, a soft humming filled the room like the sound of wind blowing through hollow wood. The circular mark on the floor began to glow faintly. Evelyn reached out her hand. "Take it," she said. "If you do, the bench will choose you next. You'll carry what I carried. You'll listen for those who have no one left to listen." David stepped back. "You mean, I'll become you?" She smiled sadly. "Not become, continue. And if I refuse, then it fades," she whispered. "The bench forgets. The hope dies." For a long moment, the room was silent, except for the faint sound of rain outside. Then David spoke quietly. "If I say yes, what happens to you?" "Then I rest." Her voice trembled, soft as the leaves outside. "Please, David, let me rest." He looked into her eyes, and for the first time, he understood the weight she carried, the endless waiting, the endless giving. He took a deep breath and stepped into the circle. The light around him brightened until the room dissolved in a warm white glow. He felt the air fill with voices, soft, countless, whispering words of gratitude and sorrow and hope. "Thank you. Don't forget me. I'll try again." Evelyn smiled one last time. "Goodbye, my dear." And then she was gone. The glow faded. The room went still. David stood alone in the quiet cottage, but he didn't feel alone anymore. The air around him hummed softly alive. He found himself back at the bench hours later, though he didn't remember walking there. Dawn was breaking, the first rays of sunlight catching the ripples of the lake. The brass plaque gleamed brighter than ever. A woman jogged past, tears in her eyes, muttering softly about losing her job. She sat on the far end of the bench, unaware of David's quiet smile. "You can speak," he said gently. She blinked at him, surprised. "What?" "The bench listens," he said. "It helped me once. It can help you too." She hesitated, then began to talk. Words tumbled out: pain, fear, exhaustion. When she finished, her shoulders seemed lighter. "Thank you," she whispered. David smiled faintly. "Not me. The bench." She left, and for a brief moment the wind carried a soft whisper. "Well done." Days turned to weeks. David became a silent guardian of the bench of hope. People came and went, strangers burdened by heartbreak, loss, and despair. Each time they spoke, the air shimmered faintly. And David felt the bench pulse beneath his fingertips, absorbing their pain, returning it as calm. Sometimes he heard Evelyn's voice guiding him softly. Other times he felt her warmth in the air. But one evening, as the sun sank low and the lake glowed crimson, a boy approached. It was Leo. "You came back," David said with a smile. Leo nodded. "Mom's better. The doctors don't know why. I just wanted to say thank you." David's eyes welled. "You don't have to thank me, Leo." The boy grinned. "Grandma said you would say that." David's breath caught. "Your grandma?" Leo nodded. "Evelyn. She visits me in dreams sometimes. She said you'd take care of the bench." David laughed softly through tears. She was right. The boy hugged him tightly before running off, leaving David alone with the sunset. As the sky darkened, he placed the brass key gently on the bench. The word "return" gleamed faintly, one last time before fading away. He whispered, "Rest now, Evelyn." The lake breeze brushed past his face, and a single whisper echoed back. "I already am." That night, the stars seemed closer than ever. And when David closed his eyes, he didn't dream of loss or pain, only of the lake, the bench, and a faint green shawl fluttering in the wind. Years later, when David grew old, the park had changed, but the bench remained. People still came, drawn by something they couldn't explain. Some said they felt watched over. Others said they heard whispers of kindness when they spoke their pain aloud. And when they looked closely, they noticed a small new engraving under the plaque. In loving memory of David Carter, the listener who never gave up. No one knew who carved it. But sometimes, early in the morning when fog covered the lake and the world was quiet, passers-by swore they saw two figures sitting side by side on the bench, an old man and an old woman listening together. And from somewhere among the rustling leaves, a whisper could be heard. Loss is only half the